It was a sunny afternoon when the envelope arrived, an elegant piece of stationery embossed with gold lettering. Class of 2003 reunion, it read, accompanied by an invitation to the prestigious event at a luxurious hotel downtown. Elena hesitated, her fingers lingering on the paper. This wasn't her world. Her husband, Ryan, was the successful one, a rising star in the corporate world who'd built his career on charm and connections. She was a homemaker who'd spent the last 10 years quietly supporting his ambitions, raising their son, and keeping their household intact. Ryan, however, was thrilled. "This is going to be amazing," he said, flashing her the confident smile that had once made her fall in love with him. "Everyone will be there, and I can't wait to show you off." Elena forced a smile but couldn't shake the pit in her stomach. She had met a few of Ryan's old classmates in passing, and their polished exteriors and lofty conversations had always made her feel like an outsider. She didn't have the fancy degree, the career, or the stories of international vacations. Her world revolved around simpler things: PTA meetings, grocery shopping, and volunteering at the local shelter. She was proud of her contributions, but she knew they weren't the kind of achievements that impressed people in Ryan's circles. When she shared her hesitations, Ryan brushed them off. "Don't overthink it," he said casually. "Just wear something nice, and you'll fit right in." The weeks leading up to the event passed in a blur of preparation. Ryan ordered a new suit, while Elena reluctantly bought a dress, something modest yet elegant, though she couldn't stop second-guessing her choice. On the night of the reunion, she stood before the mirror, adjusting the hem of her dress and trying to calm the nerves fluttering in her chest. Ryan, already dressed, glanced at her and nodded approvingly. "You look fine," he said, his tone devoid of the warmth she longed for. It stung, but she swallowed her feelings, as she had done so many times before. The drive to the venue was quiet. Ryan was preoccupied with his phone, responding to last-minute messages from friends who were already at the party. Elena stared out the window, the city lights blurring as they sped past. She reminded herself that she was doing this for him, to support the man she loved, even if it meant stepping far outside her comfort zone. By the time they pulled up to the hotel, her palms were clammy and her heart raced. Ryan didn't notice. He was too busy straightening his tie and checking his reflection in the car's visor. Inside, the hotel was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the room buzzed with laughter and conversation. Ryan immediately spotted a group of his old friends and headed toward them, leaving Elena to follow a step behind. As they approached, he greeted them with hearty handshakes and warm hugs. "This is Elena," he said, gesturing vaguely in her direction. "My plus one." The words stung like a slap. She wasn't introduced as his wife or partner, just a nameless addition to his evening. The ballroom was a scene straight out of a movie. Waiters in crisp uniforms glided between clusters of guests, balancing trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A grand piano played softly in the corner, its notes barely audible over the hum of conversation. Elena clutched her purse tightly, feeling like an imposter in the middle of such opulence. The women wore designer gowns, their hair styled to perfection, while the men exchanged stories of their latest successes, punctuated by hearty laughter. Ryan, in his element, was already engrossed in animated discussions with his friends. As Ryan's classmates surrounded him, Elena stood awkwardly at his side, trying to keep up with their fast-paced banter. They talked about exotic vacations, high-powered jobs, and expensive hobbies. No one asked her anything, nor did Ryan make an effort to include her in the conversation. She felt invisible, like an accessory he had brought along to complete his image. Occasionally, someone would glance in her direction with a polite smile, but the unspoken judgment in their eyes was palpable. When Ryan excused himself to grab a drink, Elena found herself standing alone. She scanned the room, hoping to find a friendly face, but all she saw were groups of people who seemed worlds apart from her. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she realized how out of place she must have looked. Her modest dress, while lovely in her own eyes, seemed plain compared to the glittering ensembles around her. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she was here for Ryan, not for anyone's approval. Still, the weight of their stares pressed down on her. Ryan returned with a drink in hand, but instead of offering it to Elena, he handed it to one of his friends, a glamorous woman who seemed to command the attention of the entire group. "This is Elena," he said again, barely glancing in her direction. "My plus one." The woman's eyes flickered over Elena, her lips curling into a faint, dismissive smile. "Oh, how lovely," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. Elena felt the sting of humiliation rise in her chest. The group burst into laughter at a joke Ryan made, and Elena realized she had no idea what they were laughing about. She tried to catch Ryan's eye, hoping for some reassurance, but he was too busy basking in the admiration of his peers. The disconnect between them had never felt so stark. For years, she had stood by him, supporting his dreams and putting her own on hold. Now, it was as if those years of dedication meant nothing. She was just his plus one, a title that reduced her to an afterthought. The evening wore on, each passing moment amplifying her sense of isolation. Elena stayed close to Ryan, hoping he would notice her discomfort and offer some kind words, but he seemed oblivious. When he finally introduced her to another couple, he said, "Elena stays home with our son. She's great at keeping things running smoothly." Though he smiled, his tone was patronizing, as if her role in their family was insignificant compared to his accomplishments. The other couple nodded politely, but their disinterest was clear. For the first time that evening, Elena wished she hadn't come. Elena's discomfort grew as Ryan continued to mingle, oblivious to how his words and actions had wounded her. At one point, a man with a booming laugh, a former teammate of Ryan's, pointed toward Elena and said, "Ryan, you always were full of surprises. I never imagined you'd settle for someone so grounded." The room erupted in laughter, the kind that made Elena's cheeks burn. She forced a smile, pretending not to notice the insult, but the weight of their judgment settled heavily on her. Another woman chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "You must have your hands full at home," she said, her gaze flicking over Elena's simple dress. "It's so nice of Ryan to give you a night off." The implication was clear, Elena didn't belong here. Her life, centered around her family and home, was far removed from the glamorous, fast-paced world these people inhabited. Ryan didn't defend her. Instead, he laughed along, as though their remarks were harmless fun. Elena excused herself under the guise of getting some air. She wandered toward the balcony, the laughter and chatter fading behind her. The night air was crisp, but it did little to cool the heat of embarrassment in her chest. She leaned against the railing, staring at the city lights below, wondering why she had come. This wasn't just about the reunion or Ryan's friends. It was about the growing chasm between them, a gap that now felt insurmountable. Elena stayed on the balcony longer than she intended, hoping the quiet would help her regain her composure. But the silence only amplified her thoughts. She replayed the evening's events in her mind, each snide comment and dismissive glance cutting deeper. Tears welled in her eyes, and she brushed them away quickly, ashamed of her emotions. This wasn't the first time she had felt overshadowed by Ryan's world, but tonight felt different. It felt final. As she turned to head back inside, she overheard a conversation through the open doors. "I mean, look at her," a woman's voice said, followed by a low chuckle. "What does she even bring to the table?" Another voice responded, "Ryan must have married her out of convenience. She's certainly not his equal." Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't need to see their faces to know they were talking about her. Unable to bear it any longer, she made her way toward the exit, her vision blurred with tears. The grand room seemed to close in around her, the sparkling chandeliers and polished marble floors now a cruel backdrop to her humiliation. She glanced at Ryan one last time, standing at the center of his crowd, laughing as though nothing else in the world mattered. He didn't notice her leave. Outside the hotel, Elena's heels clicked against the pavement as she walked aimlessly, the cold air biting through her thin dress. She had no destination in mind, she just needed to get away. But as she rounded the corner, she ran into one of Ryan's classmates, a tall, impeccably dressed woman who had been particularly cruel. "Oh, it's you," the woman said, her voice laced with mockery. "Leaving so soon? Can't handle the pressure of the spotlight?" Elena didn't respond, hoping to avoid further confrontation, but the woman stepped closer, blocking her path. "You know, I've always wondered what it's like to be the consolation prize," she continued. "Ryan could have had anyone. Yet here you are, the quiet little homemaker. How quaint." Elena's hands trembled as she clenched her purse tighter. She wanted to defend herself, to tell this woman she didn't know the first thing about her life. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, Elena turned and walked away, leaving the woman smirking behind her. As she walked, her mind raced. She had endured years of subtle dismissals, of feeling like an afterthought in Ryan's world. Tonight had been the breaking point. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. She wasn't just humiliated by his classmates. She was hurt by Ryan's indifference. When Elena returned home, the house felt colder than usual, its silence a stark contrast to the bustling energy of the party. She kicked off her heels and sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. The events of the evening replayed in her mind, each moment more painful than the last. She thought of Ryan's laughter, his dismissive introductions, and the way he had let his friends mock her without a second thought. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, and she saw Ryan's name flash on the screen. For a moment, she considered answering, but the memory of his laughter stopped her. She let the call go to voicemail. A text followed shortly after, "Where did you go? You left without saying anything." There was no apology, no concern, just confusion, as though he couldn't fathom why she might have wanted to leave. Elena stared at the message, her chest tightening. For years, she had convinced herself that her sacrifices were for the greater good of their family. But tonight, she realized how much of herself she had given up in the process. She was tired of being invisible, of feeling like an accessory in her own marriage. And for the first time, she wondered if things could ever change. The next morning, Elena woke early, the weight of the previous night still heavy on her heart. Ryan wasn't home yet, and she didn't expect him to be. He had probably stayed late at the reunion, basking in the admiration of his peers. She moved through the house mechanically, packing a small bag with essentials. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed space to think. Before leaving, she sat at the kitchen table and wrote a note. Her hand trembled as she formed the words, each letter carrying the weight of her decision. "Ryan," it began. "I need some time to figure out what I want and who I am. Please don't contact me right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready." She placed the note on the counter, next to the coffee machine where she knew he'd see it. As she closed the door behind her, a sense of both relief and fear washed over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in years, she was choosing herself. The road ahead felt uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure: she couldn't keep living in the shadows of someone else's life. The drive to her friend Mia's house felt both surreal and liberating. Mia had always been the person Elena turned to in moments of doubt, a confidant who never judged and always listened. When Elena arrived, Mia greeted her with a warm embrace, immediately sensing that something was wrong. Elena broke down, recounting the humiliation of the reunion, Ryan's indifference, and her growing sense of invisibility in her marriage. Mia listened intently, her eyes brimming with empathy. "You've spent so many years pouring yourself into Ryan's life, Elena," she said gently. "Maybe it's time to pour that energy into yourself." Elena nodded, her heart heavy but hopeful. For so long, she had neglected her own needs, believing that supporting Ryan was her purpose. Now, for the first time, she was beginning to see that she deserved more. Over the next few days, Mia's home became Elena's sanctuary. She avoided her phone, letting Ryan's calls and texts go unanswered. She needed time to think, to untangle the emotions that had been building for years. Each morning, she took long walks through Mia's neighborhood, breathing in the crisp autumn air and reflecting on the choices that had led her here. The silence was healing, but it also left her grappling with the question she had been avoiding: could her marriage be saved? Ryan returned home from the reunion to find the house eerily quiet. The note on the counter stopped him in his tracks. As he read Elena's words, a wave of confusion and frustration swept over him. "What is this about?" he muttered, crumpling the note in his hand. He tried calling her again, but it went straight to voicemail. For the first time in their marriage, Ryan felt the unsettling absence of Elena's presence. At first, he told himself that she was overreacting, that she just needed a day or two to cool off. But as the days turned into a week, a gnawing sense of unease began to creep in. Ryan realized how much he had taken Elena for granted, the way she managed their home with quiet efficiency, how she always greeted him with a smile no matter how late he worked, the way she listened without judgment. Without her, the house felt empty, lifeless. He replayed the night of the reunion in his mind, searching for the moment things had gone wrong. The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. He had dismissed her, ignored her, and allowed his peers to demean her, all in the name of fitting in. Ryan had always prided himself on his charm and charisma, but now he saw those qualities for what they were: tools he had used to build a facade, while neglecting the one person who mattered most. While Ryan grappled with his guilt, Elena was embarking on a journey of self-discovery. Mia encouraged her to explore her passions, and Elena found herself drawn to art, a love she had abandoned years ago. She enrolled in a local painting class, where she spent hours experimenting with colors and textures. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of joy and creativity that she thought she had lost. The class was a diverse group, ranging from retirees to young professionals, all united by their love of art. Elena formed connections with her classmates, who admired her natural talent and encouraged her to keep pushing herself. Their words gave her confidence, and she began to see herself in a new light, not just as Ryan's wife or a mother, but as an individual with her own voice and aspirations. One afternoon, as she painted a vibrant landscape, she realized how far she had come in just a few weeks. The colors on the canvas reflected her transformation, bold, dynamic, and full of life. Elena wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt empowered to shape it on her own terms. With Mia's encouragement, Elena decided to turn her newfound passion into something more. She began selling her paintings at local markets and online, building a small but loyal following. Her work resonated with people, many of whom shared stories about how her art had brought them comfort or inspiration. Each sale was a reminder that she had something valuable to offer the world. Elena's confidence grew with every step she took toward independence. She started dressing differently, choosing outfits that made her feel strong and beautiful. She took herself out for coffee, relishing the freedom of her own company. For so long, she had defined herself by her roles as a wife and mother. Now, she was discovering who she was beyond those titles. Meanwhile, Ryan was struggling to adjust to life without Elena. He tried to bury himself in work, but the emptiness at home was impossible to ignore. He found himself missing the little things, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she hummed while cooking, the way she always seemed to know what he needed before he did. Each memory was a painful reminder of what he had lost. Elena's journey wasn't without challenges, but she found solace in the support of her growing circle of friends. The women in her art class became a source of encouragement, always cheering her on and offering advice. Mia remained a constant presence, reminding Elena of her strength on days when doubt crept in. Even her parents, who had been skeptical of her decision to leave, began to see the positive changes in her. One evening, as they sat around Mia's kitchen table, Elena shared her fears about the future. "What if I've made a mistake?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if Ryan and I can't fix this?" Mia reached across the table, taking Elena's hand in hers. "You haven't made a mistake," she said firmly. "You're finding yourself, Elena. That's never a mistake. And if Ryan truly loves you, he'll understand that." Elena nodded, her heart heavy but hopeful. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of community, a network of people who valued her for who she was, not who she was expected to be. The silence in the house became unbearable for Ryan. He found himself pacing the living room late at night, the glow of the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The routine that Elena had so effortlessly maintained was now unraveling. Laundry piled up, dishes sat unwashed, and the emptiness of the home seemed to mirror the emptiness within him. He hadn't realized how much he relied on her until she was gone. Ryan tried to distract himself with work, pouring hours into projects and attending back-to-back meetings. But even his colleagues noticed the change in him. He was less confident, more irritable. The charm that had once made him a favorite among clients seemed to falter under the weight of his guilt. At night, he found himself scrolling through old photos of him and Elena, memories of happier times when they were young and in love. The hardest part was seeing her absence reflected in every corner of their home. The throw pillows she had meticulously arranged were untouched, the family calendar on the wall remained frozen on the date she left, and the smell of her favorite lavender candles had long faded. Ryan realized that without her, his life lacked warmth and meaning. For the first time, he admitted to himself that he was the one who needed to change. Elena avoided social media for weeks, not wanting to see photos from the reunion that had caused her so much pain. But one evening, as she browsed through her phone, a picture appeared in her newsfeed, a group photo from the event. Ryan stood in the center, surrounded by his old classmates, a forced smile on his face. Elena's heart ached as she noticed the emptiness in his eyes, something she hadn't seen before. Looking closer, she spotted herself in the background of the photo, standing alone by the bar. The image brought back a flood of emotions, the humiliation, the isolation, and the quiet resolve that had led her to walk away. Yet, as she stared at the photo, she felt a glimmer of pride. That woman in the background had been brave enough to choose herself, to leave behind a situation that no longer served her. Elena saved the photo, not as a reminder of the pain, but as a symbol of her strength. She had come so far since that night, and she wasn't the same woman anymore. The thought gave her comfort as she returned to her painting, adding bold strokes of color to the canvas before her. She had no idea that Ryan had seen the same photo and was haunted by it, his own expression a mirror of his regrets. Weeks later, Elena found herself at a local bookstore, browsing through the self-help section. She had come to enjoy these small outings, moments of solitude where she could think and recharge. As she reached for a book on personal growth, she froze. Standing at the end of the aisle was Ryan. He looked tired, his usually polished appearance slightly disheveled, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Elena," he said softly, as if afraid to scare her away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Ryan took a hesitant step forward. "I've been trying to reach you," he said. I need to talk to you. Please." Elena hesitated, unsure if she was ready to face him. But something in his voice, vulnerable and raw, made her nod. They found a quiet corner in the store, where they sat across from each other at a small table. Ryan didn't mince words. "I've been an idiot," he began, his voice cracking. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you, Elena. At the reunion, at home, in our marriage, I took you for granted, and I'm so sorry." Elena listened in silence, her emotions a mix of anger, sadness, and a faint glimmer of hope. She could see that he was sincere, but sincerity alone wasn't enough. She needed to know that he was willing to change. Ryan continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. "That night, I was so focused on impressing everyone else that I didn't see what was right in me. I let them disrespect you, and I didn't stand up for you. I thought I was doing what I needed to do to fit in, but I realize now that I lost sight of what really matters, you." Tears welled in Elena's eyes, but she held them back. She had waited years to hear these words, yet they felt bittersweet. "Ryan," she said quietly, "do you even know who I am? Beyond being your wife and the mother of your child? Do you see me as a person with dreams, talents, and value, or am I just an extension of you?" Her questions hit him like a blow. For years, Ryan had been so consumed by his own ambitions that he hadn't truly considered hers. "I see you now," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I see the amazing, strong woman I fell in love with. And I want to get to know her again, if you'll let me. But I understand if you need more time." Elena nodded, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She could see that Ryan was genuine, but trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "I'm not saying no, but I'm not ready to say yes either." Ryan nodded, respecting her boundaries for the first time in years. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'll wait." In the weeks that followed, Ryan began to show Elena that his words weren't empty promises. He started attending therapy to address his own flaws and insecurities, something he never would have considered before. He also made a conscious effort to be present in their son's life, taking him to soccer practice and helping with homework, things he had often left to Elena. Elena, meanwhile, continued to focus on her art and personal growth. She found joy in her independence and strength in the friendships she had built. But as time went on, she also noticed small changes in Ryan. His texts were no longer demanding or impatient, instead, they were thoughtful and respectful. He sent her photos of their son with little notes like, "We're cheering you on from here." Slowly, Elena began to open her heart again. She agreed to meet Ryan for coffee, where they talked not about their past mistakes, but about their hopes for the future. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of doubt, but for the first time in a long time, Elena felt like they were on the same page. They were taking small steps, but they were moving forward together. One evening, as Elena returned from her art class, she found a package waiting on Mia's doorstep with a familiar handwriting scrawled on the label. Hesitant, she opened it and found a carefully wrapped canvas inside. Unfolding it, she gasped. It was one of her paintings, a piece she had sold at a market weeks ago, framed and beautifully preserved. Attached was a note from Ryan: "Your art has always been breathtaking. I wanted a part of your world to remind me of your strength and beauty every day." Her chest tightened. Ryan had gone out of his way to support her passion in a way he never had before. For years, she had felt as though her dreams were invisible to him, but now, he was making an effort to acknowledge them. It wasn't just the painting itself, it was the thought behind it, the recognition of her worth. She clutched the note in her hand, feeling a mix of hope and trepidation. Mia noticed the package when she returned home. "That's a bold move," she said with a knowing smile. Elena nodded, her emotions swirling. "It's different this time," she admitted quietly. "For the first time, I think he's really trying to understand who I am." But understanding wasn't enough, not yet. She needed more time to see if these changes were truly lasting or just fleeting gestures born of regret. A week later, Ryan invited Elena to visit the reunion venue with him, hoping to confront the past together. At first, she resisted, the memories of that humiliating night still fresh. But something in his voice made her reconsider. "I want to show you that I see things differently now," he said. "I want to make it right, starting where I went wrong." They met at the Grand Hotel, its chandeliers and polished marble floors as imposing as she remembered. This time, however, Elena walked in with her head held high, feeling the strength she had gained over the past months. Ryan guided her to the ballroom where the reunion had taken place, now empty but still echoing with the ghosts of that night. He stood at the center of the room and turned to face her. "I was blind that night," he admitted, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I cared more about what these walls thought of me than about how I made you feel. I can't undo the hurt I caused, but I promise you, I'll never let anyone make you feel small again, not even me." Tears brimmed in Elena's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She had waited so long to hear these words, yet she knew they were just the beginning of what they needed to rebuild. In the weeks that followed, Ryan showed a consistency that surprised Elena. He began to ask her about her day, not just out of politeness, but with genuine curiosity. He accompanied her to one of her art markets, standing quietly by her side as she interacted with customers. He even started cooking dinner once a week, though his culinary skills left much to be desired. Each small act was a reminder that he was trying, really trying, to change. Elena, in turn, found herself softening. She invited him to her art studio, where she worked late into the evenings. Ryan watched as she painted, marveling at her talent and focus. "I never realized how incredible you are," he said one night, his voice tinged with awe. Elena smiled faintly, her heart cautiously opening. For so long, she had felt invisible, but now, she was starting to feel seen. Despite the progress, there were still moments of doubt. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight, and Elena needed to see if Ryan's actions would hold steady over time. She set boundaries, ensuring she had the space to continue her personal growth. Ryan respected her wishes, understanding that this was a necessary step in their journey. One evening, Elena's phone buzzed with an email that made her heart skip a beat. It was an invitation to display her paintings in a small but prestigious gallery in the city. Her hands trembled as she read the words, hardly believing her luck. Mia and her art friends celebrated the news, showering her with encouragement and excitement. It was a milestone she hadn't dared to dream of when she first picked up a brush again. The night of the gallery opening was electric. The space was filled with art lovers, collectors, and fellow artists, all admiring Elena's work. Ryan stood at the back of the room, watching with quiet pride as Elena greeted guests and spoke about her pieces. When one of the guests asked about her inspiration, Elena's voice faltered for a moment. Then, with a steady breath, she said, "My art is about rediscovering yourself after being lost for a long time. It's about strength and hope." Ryan clapped the loudest when she finished speaking, his eyes glistening with emotion. After the event, he approached her, holding a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. "You've built something incredible, and I'm honored to witness it." For the first time in years, Elena felt like an equal partner in their relationship. Ryan's transformation extended beyond his relationship with Elena. He became more involved in their son's life, attending school events and helping with homework. He also started volunteering at a local community center, a stark contrast to the self-absorbed man he once was. His colleagues noticed the change, too, commenting on how much more grounded and approachable he seemed. For Ryan, these changes weren't just about winning Elena back, they were about becoming the man he wanted to be. He realized that his previous focus on status and appearances had left him hollow. Now, he found fulfillment in the small, meaningful moments of life, cooking dinner with his son, helping a neighbor carry groceries, or simply sitting beside Elena as she painted. Elena couldn't deny the difference in him. It wasn't just the big gestures, it was the consistency, the way he showed up every day with kindness and humility. She began to trust him again, not because he said all the right things, but because his actions spoke louder than words. Slowly, the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. Months passed, and the steady rhythm of Ryan's efforts began to rebuild the fragile bridge between him and Elena. Though they still lived apart, their time together became more frequent and natural. They often met for coffee or dinner, sharing conversations that were no longer weighed down by blame or resentment. Elena found herself laughing at Ryan's jokes again, his once familiar humor now tempered by a humility she had never seen before. One evening, Ryan invited her to a small Italian restaurant, a place they had visited during their early days of dating. As they shared a meal, the conversation drifted to their past. "Do you remember how nervous I was the first time we came here?" Ryan asked, smiling. "You were so nervous you spilled water all over the table," Elena replied, her eyes sparkling with amusement. For a moment, it felt like no time had passed, as if they were once again the young couple who had fallen in love over shared dreams and endless possibilities. As they left the restaurant, Ryan reached for her hand. She hesitated but didn't pull away. "Elena," he said softly, his voice tinged with hope, "I know we can't go back to the way things were, and I don't want to. I want us to move forward, together. But only if you're ready." Elena looked up at him, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. She wasn't ready to give a definitive answer, but for the first time in a long time, she could see a future where they might find happiness again. Over the next few weeks, Elena and Ryan began taking deliberate steps toward reconciliation. They attended couples therapy, an experience that allowed them to unpack years of unspoken feelings and unmet needs. The sessions were difficult, often forcing them to confront painful truths, but they emerged stronger each time, more committed to understanding one another. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, they sat together on a park bench, watching the sunset. "This is hard work," Elena said, her voice tinged with exhaustion but also a quiet determination. "It is," Ryan agreed, "but it's worth it." "You're worth it." He reached for her hand again, and this time, she intertwined her fingers with his. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of their shared hope. That night, as they walked back to their cars, Ryan paused. "Elena," he said, his voice steady, "when you're ready, I'd like for us to come home. Not just for me, but for us. I miss our family, and I want to build a life with you that's better than the one we had before." Elena nodded, her heart full of cautious optimism. "Let's take it one step at a time," she said. "We'll get there, together." After months of hard work and healing, Elena made the decision to return home. The day she moved back was filled with a mix of emotions: excitement, nervousness, and a deep sense of gratitude for the progress they had made. Ryan greeted her at the door, his smile warm but not overbearing. "Welcome home," he said simply, helping her carry her bags inside. The house felt different now. It was still the same space they had shared for years, but it no longer carried the weight of old resentments. Instead, it felt like a fresh start, a place where they could create new memories and build a stronger foundation. Their son, thrilled to have his parents together again, wrapped Elena in a tight hug. "I missed you, Mom," he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. Elena smiled, feeling the warmth of his embrace. That evening, the three of them sat down to dinner, a simple meal that Ryan had prepared. They laughed, talked, and shared stories about their day. For the first time in years, Elena felt a sense of peace. It wasn't perfect, and she knew there would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time, she believed they could face them as a team. As the weeks turned into months, Elena and Ryan continued to grow, both as individuals and as a couple. Ryan remained committed to his personal growth, attending therapy and finding fulfillment in small, meaningful acts of kindness. Elena, too, flourished, balancing her thriving art career with her renewed role as a wife and mother. Together, they learned to communicate openly, to apologize when necessary, and to celebrate each other's successes. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Ryan turned to Elena. "Thank you for giving us another chance," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of your love." Elena smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "We've both had to grow, Ryan," she said. "But I believe in us. And I believe in the life we're building together." To mark their new beginning, Elena and Ryan decided to renew their vows. The ceremony was small and intimate, held in their backyard with close friends and family in attendance. Elena wore a simple yet elegant dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers, while Ryan stood beside her, looking at her as though she were the only person in the world. As they exchanged vows, tears filled their eyes. "I promise to see you, to value you, and to love you for who you are," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the emotion in it. Elena smiled, her heart full. "And I promise to never lose myself again, to be your partner, and to walk beside you as we create a better life together." Their son clapped enthusiastically as they kissed, his joy mirrored by everyone around them. It wasn't just a celebration of their love, it was a testament to their resilience, their willingness to fight for what mattered most. In the months that followed, Elena and Ryan found a rhythm that worked for them. They made time for date nights, family outings, and individual pursuits. Ryan continued to volunteer at the community center, while Elena's art career flourished. Their home was filled with laughter, warmth, and the occasional mess, signs of a life well lived. They still faced challenges, as all couples do, but they approached them with patience and understanding. They had learned to prioritize each other, to listen without judgment, and to grow together rather than apart. Their journey wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and they embraced it wholeheartedly. On a quiet evening, as they sat together on the porch, Elena looked out at the setting sun. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked, her voice thoughtful. Ryan nodded. "I think about it all the time," he said. "Not because I regret what happened, though I do, but because it reminds me of how far we've come." Elena smiled, reaching for his hand. "We've come a long way," she agreed. "And I'm proud of us." Ryan squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. "Me too," he said softly. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat in comfortable silence, content in the knowledge that their future was bright, built on a foundation of love, respect, and shared growth. Their story wasn't just about redemption, it was about rediscovery, resilience, and the power of choosing love, time and time again.